Yes.
Okay, thank you very much, Tom and Charlotte, for the opportunity to speak today. I'll be talking about the Coolchain monitoring for export cherries. My name is Glenn Hale, and I'm a research scientist at AgriBio in Bundoora. Yes, so talking today from lockdown Melbourne. I'll talk about a little bit about a background about the project, temperature loggers, some of their specifications, in particular Emerson data loggers, results from some of the temperature monitoring, a quick summary, some further research and acknowledgements. So as Tom and Charlotte have mentioned this morning, Southeast Asia is an important and emerging market for cherries. A few years ago, it was worth approximately $13 million. And back then, CGA did conduct some in-market assessments, and the issue they found was variability in fruit quality. So a couple of years ago, they contacted the Export Development and Investment Strategy team, otherwise known as Ag Policy. And then they contacted Agriculture Victoria Research, and that's where I work. And we developed a project called Coolchain using real-time temperature loggers. So a couple of years ago, when the project started, I was successful in monitoring about 20 air freight consignments to Vietnam. Most of them went to Saigon and a few went to Hanoi. And Vietnam is a protocol market, so it was treated by Steritech up in Queensland. And then last year, Steritech built a new treatment facility in Melbourne, based at Merrifield, which is just north of the Melbourne airport. And it was only recently, sometime at the start of the year, that they gained approval from the Vietnamese government to successfully send cherries there. There's a couple of photos of their facility in Merrifield. So the project itself, this season we were looking at exporting cherries to Korea, as it was a new market, but we also were looking at other Asian countries. And I guess the goal of the project was to identify weak spots in the Coolchain, try and streamline the export process so that we can consistently export high quality product, and that in itself will improve the reputation for Victorian and Australian cherries. I did have some plans of conducting outturn assessments, but due to COVID, didn't get over there this year. I did have a couple of trips a couple of years ago, and I'll show you some of the results from that. I have been working on developing a user-friendly dashboard from these data loggers. And the other part of the project is to test new equipment, and that's these real-time data loggers. And they can monitor location, which is good for traceability. They can measure climate, such as temperature and humidity. They also have a light sensor, which is good for tamper detection. And they also have shock or vibration sensors. Another part of the project was to test this infrared refractometer that can non-destructively measure sugars in cherries. So I guess previously exporters have used USB data loggers to monitor temperatures in export consignments. But the only issue with that is that rarely would they get any information back on the actual temperature profiles, unless if there was a problem or an issue with the temperatures, and then that potentially can result in claims on the consignment. However, in the last 5 to 10 years, there's been development in these real-time data loggers. And the benefit of these loggers is that they have a SIM card in them, so that they can connect to the mobile network, and you can access temperature and other information in real time. So there's a couple there on the left, Emerson and a Temptail Sensitech one. So there's a couple of issues with the presentation of this slide, but the logger in the middle here is an Xsense one, and it works by radio frequency. So it's similar to a toll road, I guess, when the logger passes within 30 meters of a control unit or download temperature data. The logger on the right here is a Verigo one, similar to, I guess, a USB logger, but it works via Bluetooth. So when somebody has the app installed on their phone and they're within 30 meters of the logger, they can download temperature data. Some of the specifications of these real-time loggers, there's 4 up here that I've been using in this project and other projects. Emerson, there's a Frigga one, Sensitech, and Tive, which is a newish one. They all work previously on 2G, but now more so on 3G, 4G, and there's 5G connectivity. They are all single use, so they do not need to be collected or data downloaded at the other end, because it's all in real time, and as soon as they started, information is available to whoever has access to the dashboards. They're relatively small, 80 to 90 mil by about 20 mil. They weigh roughly 100 to 150 grams. They all monitor temperature, location, and light. Some of them can monitor humidity and shock and even motion. And at this stage, I believe there's only one, the Frigga one, that has a cable or a probe attached to it. And there's 2 types, 1 meter long and a 15 meter long cable. I do believe Emerson are close to releasing something with the probe as well. They can send real-time alerts via email or SMS, and you can also program location alerts so that when loggers enter, say, freight forwarders, users can be notified that the logger has arrived there. The battery life on these loggers varies from 15 to 60 days or 90 days on some of them. Obviously, the shorter time frame is good for air freight, the longer is good for sea freight. That's not very applicable for exporting cherries. They're all cloud-based systems. The Emerson logger and the Tive logger do have flight mode functions, and I'll go into that in a minute. The Frigga and the Sensitech has a manual flight mode, so that needs to be programmed by the users. How they send information is through the cellular tower triangulation, which is reasonably accurate. The temperature range of these loggers is between -20 to 60 or 70 degrees, and they're very accurate, so within half a degree or 1 degree. And they cost around $75+. There are reusable options, and the sensing interval varies, but roughly 6 minutes upwards. And they can also, when they report to the mobile network, it's roughly every 18 or 15 minutes upwards. This is important because the lower the settings, the more battery will be used, so the logger won't last as long. The data they report in, you can get Excel, CSV, PDF files, which is handy for reviewing. Some of them do have green options, such as recycling. How do the Emerson loggers work? Well, they're all web-based, and they work via this mobile network. They send data to the cell towers, which then is accessible in the cloud, and then users can see them on dashboards on the computer or even mobile devices if the app is installed. I've mentioned that they can send email alerts, which is handy. You can also set up temperature alerts. So if product goes above or below a certain temperature, the logger will notify you. And reports are accessible right within an hour or two, I guess, of starting. And data is accessible for the whole journey. The Emerson logger is relatively easy to start. It's just got a little tab at the top which you pull out, and then you can see a little LED light that blinks, and that notifies you that the logger is active. It's important to start these loggers in an area where you have good cellular reception, and that way you'll be able to access the data straight away. In some of the loggers that I've sent, if it can't connect to the network early on, you may not see or get any data until it arrives at the other end. So that's just something to be careful of. And to access the information, it's just a matter of going to Emerson website. You'll have a login and you can enter that with a password, and then you can see the data on the network then. Where to place these loggers, this is important because it's all about finding the network and connecting to it. So a lot of these loggers, it's advisable to put them down the back of, this is for shipping, sorry, it's from another presentation. For transport anyway, put them down the back of the truck where there's better reception, and that way you should be able to see the data and access it. If loggers are put in the middle of consignments, then it may not be able to connect to the network. So once again, data may be compromised. How do these loggers work for air freight? The Emerson logger has two modes of flight mode. The first one is what we call a geofence. This can be set up manually, if you like, or with the Emerson logger, once it passes into an airport, it will automatically go into flight mode. The other way it can do that is that the Emerson logger has an accelerometer in it, so it can detect rapid changes in speed and height, and that is a backup to the geofence, I guess, so it will automatically go into flight mode as well. Emerson loggers have approval for 30 plus airlines. I believe Tide loggers have 40 odd airlines that they can be used on. And I guess it just depends on which markets you're sending cherries to as to which airlines you'll be using. This list was current as of a month or so ago. Lots on this slide, but we'll just work our way through it. On the center here is a temperature profile from an export consignment that went to China earlier this year. These red lines, this is temperature. The red lines were temperature profiles that we set to send any alerts to us. We did set it at 0 and 10, but you can see the temperature profile here, down close to 0 early on at dispatch and at the freight forwarder. This consignment did get fumigated as it went to China, and then there was a bit of a lag in cooling it down to as low as possible to 0. And then you can see the temperature increasing around the airport, and this is relatively common from the 20 odd loggers I've sent. The temperature may increase up to 10 or more degrees, and keep increasing on the flight until it arrives overseas. And then when the importer gets it, if they can put it in a cool room or warehouse relatively soon, that will help to extend, I guess, the shelf life and the quality of cherries. On this graph, you can, if you hover over the temperature profile, you can see the date, the time, and the actual temperature itself. On this one, you can see the battery life left. The red bell here is any alerts, so it's obviously gone above the preset parameters. And this is the current temperature, which is at the importers. There is also a map where you can see where the loggers have travelled. That was particularly important a couple of years ago when we looked at some consignments that went to Vietnam. Back then, they were being trucked up to Brisbane, being irradiated at Stereotech, and then sent directly to Hanoi, this one, or the other. The two right graphs here is Saigon, and they went via Singapore or Taiwan in this one. And I think this one was 1 or 2 degrees lower in the actual flight. So that's beneficial to know. This was unloading in Saigon. And here's some of the cherries that were sold in Ben Thanh Market. The graphs on the right here are from a dashboard similar to this. This is accessible on the computer, but this is on a handheld device, so very convenient. Have data at your fingertips pretty much. This was a Frigga logger that had temperature, humidity, light, and shock functions in it. So this graph here is just a replica of the one on the left, and you can see the map here as well. So what's next with this project? Well, I've been discussing some of the results from this year with the cherry growers that I've worked with. There's been a couple of industry articles. There's one previously, a couple of years ago, on the CGO website on the members section. And there was another 1 or 2 from this year as well. Hopefully we'll produce some other industry articles in other magazines. It would be nice to repeat similar trials through Stereotech's new facility in Melbourne, especially to Korea, because this is a new export pathway. And speaking of Stereotech, we do have a project with them starting next month, which is looking at quality after irradiation of different fruits. And it's a Horde innovation project worth over $1 million for 2 years. And we'll be working with Stereotech, New South Wales, DPI, SARDI, Plant and Food New Zealand. So that's pretty exciting to be working with industry there, Stereotech. And I'd just like to acknowledge the Export Development and Strategy Group for funding this project. They helped through Cherry Growers Australia and Charlotte. Stereotech in Brisbane that helped remove loggers a couple of years ago when produce was sent from Brisbane. And also thank Emerson and Frigga for their constant help and support for this project.